Alright, y'all, welcome back. This is going to be Unit 3, Day 3. Some reminders before we get started. Please make sure that you have your history notebook out and you're taking notes as you move through the video. And make sure you complete the vocabulary for this video, which will be the next slide and down in the description as always. Let's go ahead and get started. So, key terms today are going to be Mary Wollstonecraft, Olympia De Gouges, American Revolution, Enlightenment, Estates General, National Assembly, Tennis Court Oath, Ancient Regime, Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, the Reign of Terror, Robespierre, Directory, and Napoleon Bonaparte. The key concepts going to be changes and continuities in Western Europe society during the early modern period, changes and effects of the American Revolution, impact of reform and radicalism in the modern West, the causes of the French Revolution, and the progression of the French Revolution. So let's talk about some kind of limits to some revolutionary ideas. As you remember, the Enlightenment calls for equality, but it's not generally extended to women. So we do have some, influential women and minorities that kind of that people really advocate for during the modern period. Of course, we have Mary Wollstonecraft, who decreed that women possess the same natural rights as men. She's going to be kind of one of the biggest vocalists during this time. But also at the same time, women were very crucial to revolutionary activities. Olympia De Gouges, she's going to be part of the French Revolution, and she's going to declare the full citizenship of women in France. The problem is that eventually she will be executed for her ideals. But during that time, it's very radical during the French Revolution, which we'll talk about later today. But in the 19th century in the United States, women began to gain more and more rights. The Seneca Falls Declaration of Women's Rights is going to be the American Declaration of Women's Rights, a women's declaration of their rights, and it's going to really kind of push and kind of be the basis for the early 20th century women's rights in the United States. Now, for slavery, there's going to be a lot of testing the limits of whether or not we can get rid of slavery. There's going to be abolitionist movements to end the slave trade, and by the end of this unit, the slave trade will be over. There'll be one holdout right up until the end, but by the end of this unit, this will be the end of the slave trade. Right? We also have changes in Western society after 1850. Well, as we talked about yesterday or last time, we have working problems. The working conditions are awful. Most of the time, they're forced to work in factory towns in these really cramped super apartments that are just have 4 or 5 families crammed in small spaces. Most of the time, the factory workers will not pay their workers with money. They're going to pay them with factory money called script. And this factory money has no real worth outside of the factory town or the factory city. So it's one of those where it's worthless, and this is why people go into debt so they can maintain their standard of living. And you basically, this is the old thing, they sold their soul to the company store because they're in debt to the company store. Also, unions become a real problem for factories because they advocate for workers' rights. So this means that there is no unions. All right, so a lot of these companies would establish a no unions contracts, which we call yellow dog contracts, because unions became a big problem for factories over time because you couldn't abuse the workers anymore. So this leads to more changes for workers, such as better wages, decrease in working time, rise of leisure time. This increases sports, lacrosse, tennis, cricket, baseball, right? But there's an increase in health plus an increase in physical risk, though. So it's very kind of double-sided, right? We also have the growth of the white-collar workforce. This is going to be like the managerial, educated workforce. We have growth in blue-collar workforce. This is going to be the low-skill, factory workers, things like that. And due to all this, we also have an increase in urbanization, and this also increases the role of women due to industrialization and education, right? So women needed to work in the factories, women needed to do more for the household than before. Right? So let's talk about some revolutionary ideas. Of course, we have absolute monarchies, which are traditional monarchies, that claim to be divine right. We've talked about that before. And of course, we have constitutional monarchies, which are monarchies with a constitutional limitation. Aristocracy, Enlightenment challenged the king. In 1688, we have the Glorious Revolution, which replaces England's kind of move back toward absolute monarchy with a constitutional monarchy. And it's really going to be kind of based off of John Locke's theory of contractual government, or the social contract. So it's one of those where we have and we see that the contractual government is the ruling class is only in power due to the consent of the governed, right? So the people control the government to ensure the government is practicing its best practices. We also have more freedom and equality, freedom for worship, and we have Rousseau's social contract. We have Montesquieu's separation of powers, Voltaire's freedom of religion. Then we also have the ideals of the Enlightenment. We're kind of impacting at the global stage now, instead of just like at the local kind of really kind of industrialized areas. They're now more impacting global areas. So again, Rousseau's social contract, meaning that the governed are control the government. Montesquieu's separation of powers, to make sure that no one government is too powerful. Voltaire's freedom of religion, which is going to be you could have the freedom of religion no matter what religion you are. So let's talk about some of the kind of big first world wars, right? The American Revolution from 1776 to 1783. Of course, as you guys have known, right, from 8th grade, that it was a British colonist revolt inspired by the Enlightenment, right? Basically, they were being taxed by the British government without representation in Parliament, no taxation without representation. They were doing some more and more tax, the Intolerable Act, Sugar Act, things like that, causing more and more taxes. People get tired of it. They revolt, right? Treaty of Paris ends the war. This gives the Americans the independence. And the biggest impact of this is that, oh man, hey, these backwater colonists in the New World beat the British Empire, right? Maybe we can overthrow our colonial oppressors. Maybe we can overthrow our totalitarian government and move on from there. So it really kind of influences Latin American revolts and even the French Revolution, and kind of snowballs, right? Economic impact of this, it bankrupts France. And this leads directly to the French Revolution, right? Which we're going to talk about here in a moment. So, France helps the colonists in the New World, in America, to overthrow the British oppressors. Okay. Well, in doing that, France becomes bankrupt. Right? But before we can really dive into the progression of the French Revolution, because it kind of swings back and forth on who is in control, let's talk about the very beginning of it. So we have King Louis the 16th. He forces the Estates General to raise taxes. Well, what you need to know is there's 3 estates, or 3 parts of government in France. You have the first estate, which is going to be the clergy, right? They represent 1% of the population, just 1%. Then you have the second estate, which is the nobles, who represent 9% of the population, right? And what they do is and there's a third estate. The third estate is the commoners, right? And they're basically, everyone gets 1 vote, right? The nobles get 1 vote, the clergy gets 1 vote, and the people get 1 vote, right? So, in that, right, it was always 2 to 1, because the clergy and the nobles always work together, right? Because they control most of the wealth. That's where 90% of the wealth comes from, right? And so these two groups would always ostracize the commoners, so the commoners would never do anything. Right? So, what the third estate does is they get really angry at the situation. They kind of rise up and they take over the tennis court at the government building, or the Treaty of or the Versailles, or the Palace at Versailles, I believe, right? And they bar the door and they refuse to leave until it is until the other two estates reform the government into what is known as the National Assembly, right? And this is known as the tennis court oath. So taking over a tennis court and protesting worked, and then you get the National Assembly. So we move on to the National Assembly. The National Assembly is formed by representatives of the Third Estate on June 17th, 1789. Well, about a month later, right, on July 14th, 1789, an angry mob seizes the Bastille. Now, what is a Bastille? A Bastille is a place where it's a prison / armory / where the military keeps its weapons. And this is a group of people who storm the Bastille and start distributing the military's weapons. This sparks more revolution and kind of uprisings, and the National Assembly, which of course is known as the Third Estate, is trying to flex its power. Yeah, we're the 90% of the population. We can do it. We're gonna be better than you, right? And this is the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, right? And they really begin to kind of push for the destruction of the absolute monarchy. Let's make it a constitutional monarchy. We'll get some parliament in here, and everything will be fine. And France becomes a constitutional monarchy in 1791. So, let's kind of swing the pendulum the other way, right? So that's kind of conservative, let's still a monarchy, monarchy, right? We'll just make it a constitution, we'll limit the monarchy. Well, then we move into the Reign of Terror. Well, what starts the Reign of Terror? Where Austria and Prussian armies invade France, because Austria and Prussians are still absolute monarchy, and they're friends with Louis XVI, and Louis XVI they're like, okay, Prussia and Russia are going to invade and reestablish Louis XVI as the absolute king of the France. Well, the thing is, Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette are in prison because of the National Assembly. Well, what do? The Jacobins, who are these extremely democratic, extremely left kind of government leaders, will execute Louis XVI and execute Marie Antoinette. And they're going to dominate the convention between 1793 and 1794 in what is known as the Reign of Terror. This is where they're really going to crack down. This is where they are, making sure that you are loyal to France and the National Assembly and the Reign of Terror. And the leader of the Jacobins is known as Robespierre. Now, they also do a couple other things, right? They changes in religion, right? They kind of mend the Catholic kind of dissidents, right? They change how you can dress. They change the calendar. They give women few rights. They kind of change the women's rights system, right? Well, that doesn't necessarily work forever, right? Because when you start changing a whole bunch of stuff, is everyone like that? No, they're not, right? And this leads to the Directory. So the pendulum on the left, right, is now going to swing to the right. And this is going to be a conservative reaction against the excesses of the National Convention, or the National Assembly. And this takes place over 4 years. And they're really going to kind of push back against these kind of radical, left democratic ideals. Well, 4 years of constant back and forth and civil war and, all this mess. And, well, we finally get a guy who comes in. He's a general in the French army. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. And he comes to France. He brings stability. He blends monarchy, aristocrat, democracy all together. He's going to make peace with the Roman Catholic Church and the Pope. He's going to extend religious freedom to the Protestants and the Jews. And he basically, not necessarily coins the term enlightened despotism, but he brings kind of enlightened absolute monarchy to to France. And what he's going to do is he's going to create something known as the Napoleonic Code. And the Napoleonic Code is all the laws that the National Assembly and the Directory and all these people have made, and he kind of codifies them and makes them law, right? And a lot of this is political and legal equality for all adult men, freedom of religion, and kind of sets him as the emperor, and everybody like, oh, Napoleon, you did it, you're great, right? And Napoleon then can kind of go on about conquering the rest of Europe, but we ain't got there yet. We'll get there, right? But this is going to lead through a era of extreme conflict. Speaking of the French and Napoleon and the era of global conflict, for 22 years, Napoleon will ending the revolution, and kind of the French Revolution, American Revolution is really, kind of really starts this period of massive revolution and kind of rebellion in certain places, throwing off the colonial oppressors. At the same time that Napoleon is conquering Europe, because he's now declared himself emperor for life, and he conquers most of Western Europe until 1815 when he's defeated by the Russians, right? So it's just this big overthrow of constant revolution and overthrowing and revolution. During this time in 1823, Mexico will overthrow Spain, and doing this, and it's just a period of global conflict and global revolution and global kind of re-establishing the status quo, right? So again, it's a period of kind of global unrest, global conflict, right? Now, Europe in 1812, which is going to be the picture on the right, is a lot more. There's countries, but they're kind of big, right? By 1815, Europe kind of looks like Europe does today, right? So that's where we're going to end for today. So again, make sure you're following along on your notes. Make sure you're doing the vocabulary, and I'll see you guys in class. Thank you.